Hey, Pete, Mr. Mendoza, over here, someone shouted at us from somewhere in the crowd. It was Johnny and Loopy calling to us from the corner of the restaurant. They were standing next to a younger couple. You guys come over here, Johnny shouted at us, and bring some of that good imported beer with you. Alas, Mr. Mendoza said, bending over to pick up one of the ice chests. My good, strong, imported beer has been found out. Do you need some help carrying that, Mr. M? Yes, why don't you take one end of this ice chest and I'll take the other. Here, Pete, let me see. Okay, grab the chest's handle and hold the bottom. There, like that, you got it, Pete. He grunted out the words as we lifted the ice chest into the air. Got it, Mr. M? I asked him. Now all we have to do is make our way through all of these people here. Watch out, Pete. You almost tripped over that little girl behind you, he said. Oh, I didn't see her. Is there anyone else behind me, Mr. M? No, the path is clear for now. As we cut a swath through the crowd of people celebrating in the restaurant, Mr. Mendoza continuously let out a Pete, watch out, and a behind you, Pete, fly out of his mouth. Finally, he said, Little girl, watch out there. We're coming through. Okay, let her down for a second. We're almost there. I let the ice chest down to the floor gently and said, Mr. M, you look beat. Are you feeling okay? Fit as a fiddle, but I sure don't feel like playing that damn fiddle right now, he said, taking a deep breath of air. What's taking you guys so long? Johnny said, walking up behind me. Here, I'll help with the chest. Johnny hefted up one end, and I lifted the other. We walked it slowly to where Loopy was standing with the other couple. This is Rhonda and Chewy Cincinnatos from Bishop. Rhonda's Loopy's cousin, Johnny said. Rhonda and Chewy, this is Mr. Mendoza and Pete, good friends of ours from the restaurant. Nice to meet you, they greeted us. Likewise, Mr. Mendoza said. Look, Loopy said, I'm not the only one who's pregnant around here. Yeah, but Rhonda's almost due. She's 8.5 months into her pregnancy, Johnny said. You still got about 8 more months to go, Loopy. Híjole, I can feel the pains even now, Rhonda said, holding her swollen stomach. The girls aren't drinking, Johnny said as he began to hand out new beers to the men. So I'll drink their share for 'em. Do you have any other children? Mr. Mendoza asked Rhonda. Sí, 5. My mother is their babysitter. And our cook too, Chewy whispered behind her back. What do you mean? You saying I can't cook? Rhonda said, slapping him on the back. No, honey, I'm just saying that I can't eat it. Just then, a gun sounded being shot off from outside of the restaurant as an array of bullets tore apart the windows, causing a crescendo of broken glass over the mariachi's loud music. People started to scream and fall onto the floor of the restaurant. Somewhere in the mess of bodies, a mother was crying her son's name. Jefe! Jefe! Watch out for that glass, someone yelled. Look out, another voice cried. Get down! Someone's shooting at us from the outside. Donde? Donde? Someone call the police. Call an ambulance. 3 people are down, a voice that sounded like Juan Reyes shouted. Juan, I shouted, is that you? See, we're over here by the restrooms. Hold on, I'm coming over there, I shouted back at him. Are you shot? No. Are your brothers with you? See, but they're okay. As I made my way through the terrified mass of people, I stopped along the way to make sure no one else was injured. When I finally came onto the spot where Juan and his brothers were at, I saw Concha Ramirez lying against the back wall near the restroom, holding her bloodied shoulder. Less than 3 feet away from her were the bodies of 2 men I had never seen before. They were both lying in a pool of blood, dead. What happened? I asked Juan. I don't know. 1 minute we were complaining about the restaurant's food to the new owner again, and then bullets come flying through the windows like quick death. She's okay, but those 2 are dead, Juan said. Yes, I can see that, I said. Someone called an ambulance on their cell phone. They're on their way, and so are the police. Ma'am, can you hear me? What? See, Pete, Mr. Mendoza said, looking up from tending to Rhonda. Her water broke and the baby's on the way. Did someone call for an ambulance yet? Yes, but maybe we should call for another one. Concha's been shot and 2 men are dead from bullet wounds. What? Is she all right? Mr. Mendoza asked me. Yes, luckily the bullet only penetrated her upper shoulder, nothing more. Oh, thank God, he breathed, lowering his head to the floor. The other 2 men weren't so lucky, though. They caught the deadly ones, I said. Just then Rhonda let out a billowing, "Ah!" into the midst of the confusion. I don't think another ambulance will do any good now, Pete. The baby's coming out, Mr. Mendoza shouted. What are we going to do? Chewy looked at us in distress. What? You got 5 kids at home, man. Didn't you already see your wife give birth before now? Johnny said. No. She had all of the kids in the hospital while I was at work. Mr. Mendoza, couldn't you? Surely you've seen a woman give birth before. Couldn't you pull out the baby? Somehow? Chewy asked. Someone do something, Rhonda screamed out, and everyone standing around her jumped. Well, this might come as a shock to everyone, but I have never seen a woman give birth before. I'm losing my mind right now just listening to her screaming, Mr. Mendoza said. Pete, come over here. What are you going to need me to do, Mr. M? What's going on back here, Mr. Munoz said, sticking his head in between Johnny and Chewy. Madre, he replied when he saw Rhonda lying sprawled on the floor with her legs wide open. She almost is for the 6th time, you old fool. This woman's having a baby, Mr. Mendoza shouted back at him. Rhonda opened her mouth in the shape of a large O, and a look of intense agony came across her face, like someone was trying to wrench her intestines out from her abdomen. Then, a high-pitched, "Oh!" came out of her mouth. Pete, hurry, bring some kind of damn water over here. But first, let's see if we can get this tablecloth beneath her, Mr. Mendoza shouted. I crouched down and said, Okay, Mr. M, where do you want me to put it? Oh, Rhonda cried in agony. What happened? Johnny asked us. Nothing. Yet. Okay, Mr. M, I got the tablecloth on the floor in front of her. Now what? I'll grab this end, you get the other, and we'll pull it slowly underneath her, okay? Now, Pete, pull. We got it. All right, Mr. M, now what? I asked as the sweat gushed from my forehead. Ah, Rhonda screamed. Hey, that one wasn't too bad, Johnny said. Where the hell's Loopy anyway? Couldn't she help us out with this? Mr. Mendoza asked Johnny. Híjole, she could barely take it the time she gave birth to our son Noah, Johnny said. She's over there helping take care of Concha's wounded shoulder. Mr. Mendoza stood up and looked toward the back of the restaurant and said, Call her over here, John. Concha has enough people around her helping her out. We need her over here right now. Where's that ambulance anyway? Loopy walked up and said, I can help her breathe, but I can't stand the sight of a baby being born. I'm sorry. Well, it's time to start learning today. Get down here and help Pete pull out the baby while I help her breathe and control her contractions, Mr. Mendoza said, positioning his hand behind her head. Say what? I cried. Come on, Pete. Don't pussyfoot around. This baby's on the way, man, Mr. Mendoza shouted. I closed my eyes as I reached beneath Rhonda's dress. When I reopened my eyes, I saw that Loopy was following my lead and doing the same. Mr. Mendoza said, Do you see anything yet? Loopy looked up and said, No, not yet. Wait, I said. I felt something bump my hand. Tell me that was you, Loopy. No, Pete, it wasn't. Oh my God. The baby's head is starting to come out, she screamed. Come on, Rhonda, breathe with me. Breathe, Mr. Mendoza said, stroking her temple with his hand. Pete, do you see it? Loopy asked. Wait, yes, I do see it. Keep pushing, I said. Oh, Rhonda screamed one last time and the baby came out. Where's that water? Mr. Mendoza shouted. We need to wash the baby's eyes and mouth out. Here. Loopy reached up and grabbed a large pitcher of fluid. This is lemonade. We can't douse the baby with lemonade. Dump it out and go fill it up with water right now, Loopy, Mr. Mendoza said. My baby, where's my baby? Rhonda cried. Pete, Johnny asked me, aren't you supposed to slap its bottom or something to make it cry? I looked up at Mr. Mendoza and said, I don't know. Do it, he replied forcefully. I got the water, Loopy said. Where are those paramedics? They're outside trying to get into the parking lot, someone shouted. What? The parking lot's too full of cars and trucks. They're parking in the road, another person shouted. It's okay, I said, holding the crying baby into the air. She's fine. Here's your baby girl, Rhonda. I gently handed the baby over to her. My baby, she cried. 4 paramedics hurried in through the restaurant's entrance, followed by 3 police officers. Who's been shot? One of the paramedics asked. Over there, I pointed behind me. And this woman just had a baby. Come on, Pete, let's get you cleaned up. You did a great job, Mr. Mendoza said, placing his hand on my shoulder. Yes, we'll take over from here, one of the paramedics said to Mr. Mendoza. Thank you, Pete, Chewy said, shaking my hand. As we walked toward the restrooms, the two paramedics were carting Concha off on a stretcher. Mr. Mendoza looked over at me and I said, "Go on, Mr. M. I can clean up by myself." "All right, Pete. I just wanted to make sure she's going to be all right, you know. I'm sure she'll be fine, Mr. M. She's probably just a little traumatized after all of the commotion that happened here today. I guess I worry too much. I was just thinking about her heart, I guess. But yeah, I'm sure she'll be just fine. Well, Pete, until we meet again. Same place, I take it," he said as he walked toward the door. "See, hey, you know something?" "What?" "This was the first time I delivered a human being into the world." Mr. Mendoza shook his head, smiled, and said, "And many more to come." "No, one time is enough for me. Come on, I'll walk you outside." "Oh, come on, Pete. You know you love the madness of it all," Mr. Mendoza laughed. "Sure, I enjoy the madness of living on the edge like being shot at, screaming women having babies, and all at the same time too. It helps keep me sane in my insane life," I said. We stopped for a minute and stood by the side of the ambulance. Mr. Mendoza looked at the ground and said, "Look, Pete, a dandelion growing up through all this hard and cold concrete and gravel. A last visage of true and pure beauty in our world." "Mr. M, I think the ambulance is getting ready to leave," I said all of a sudden. "Okay, Pete, you take care of yourself. I'll see you soon," he said as he slowly climbed into the back of the ambulance. With its sirens blasting and lights blazing, I watched as the ambulance tore out of the parking lot and headed downtown.